Hey folks, this episode of Basics is sponsored by Blue Apron. The first 100 people to sign up using the link in this video's description will get $60 off their first 3 weeks. Today, after we've learned how to make a few different kinds of cornbread, Blue Apron is going to teach us how to make a sweet version, a cornmeal upside down cake. Let's get down to basics. So first, let's start with the classic Southern cornbread, which I'm sure many Southerners would say cannot be made without lard. And I'm sure they'd also say that it contains no flour, only high-quality cornmeal, 2 cups worth, to which we're going to add 1 teaspoon of kosher salt and a couple much-needed leaveners, a half teaspoon each of baking powder and baking soda. And right about now, I'm noticing that this looks like not quite enough cornmeal. Oh yeah, I said 2 cups. 2 cups in this case of coarsely ground cornmeal, which, as you will see, is going to make a notable difference in our final texture. Now onto the wet stuff. 2 large eggs whisked together with 1 1/2 cups of buttermilk, and that's it. True Southern style cornbread is a simple but delicate dance, like the square dance or the ratchet. Whisk the dry stuff into the wet stuff, and then it's time to adjust for consistency. I'm going for something a little bit thicker than pancake batter, so I'm gonna add a little bit more cornmeal and paddle together until I find the thickness I desire. Then it's time to contend with our lard, about a half cup's worth. We're gonna melt our lard over medium flame in a cast iron skillet, and then when melted, not hot, we're going to add about half of it to our cornbread batter. Mixing together to combine, the rest of the lard remains in the skillet, which we're going to place over medium-high heat until shimmering. We want this pan ripping hot so we can get a super crisp crust on the bottom of our cornbread. Carefully dump the batter into the hot oil where you should be met with some righteous sizzlage. Smooth out the top, and then this guy's headed straight into a preheated 425-degree Fahrenheit oven for about 20 to 25 minutes until set, light brown in the center, and deep golden brown around the edges. Let cool on a wire rack for about 15 minutes before slicing and serving. Now, the first thing you might notice about this cornbread is that it's pretty darned craggly. I used a very coarse cornmeal in a thicker batter. I did this to demonstrate 2 different concepts, coarseness and batter thickness, the effects they have on cornbread and you. Now I'm going to use the exact same recipe, but this time using a much more finely ground cornmeal, with none extra added so the batter stays relatively thin. This, despite the sparseness of the recipe, is going to create a more delicate cake-like structure, which might be a little bit more pleasing to the mouth. From here on out, it gets the same treatment. Into the hot lard it goes, which is going to give it those nice crispy edges, and then into the 425-degree Fahrenheit oven it goes for 20 to 25 minutes. This is a great opportunity to break out the good old-fashioned toothpick test, making sure that one emerges with only a few moist crumbs a-clingin'. Let rest for 10 to 15 minutes on a wire rack before slicing and serving while still warm. And as you can see, this version looks and feels much more delicate. And I gotta say, I love Southern style cornbread. It's got a super crisp bottom that's effectively been deep fried in all that fat, and it's got a much more savory, robust, corny flavor than its cake-like northern counterparts, and as you can see, grind size makes a huge difference. But no matter what style of cornbread you're making, I think an essential accompaniment is honey butter, a life-changing condiment that is achieved simply enough by whipping together 2 sticks of unsalted room temperature butter with a 1/4 cup of honey. Just keep going until it's light and fluffy and no lumps remain. And I know it sounds crazy that something with a name like honey butter could be delicious. I mean, just listen to it. Honey butter, honey butter, honey butter. But yeah, it's totally awesome, and you're going to want to spread it on everything, most notably cornbread. Anyway, to our friends south of the Mason Dixon Line, I hope I've done you proud. Now let's make the sweet, cakey Yankee version, which, as you can see, involves more ingredients. Let's start with the dry, and we're measuring things by weight this time around, 5 ounces each of finely ground cornmeal and all-purpose flour, the same half teaspoon each of baking powder, baking soda, and 1 teaspoon of kosher salt. Then this is going to end up being jalapeno cornbread, so I'm going to add a half teaspoon of cayenne pepper, which I'm going to tiny whisk to homogeneity, or the state of being homogeneous. Then this is going to end up being jalapeno cheddar cornbread, so I'm also going to add 4 ounces of grated cheddar, which I'm just going to toss to coat with the dry ingredients so it don't stick together before we begin to contend with the wet stuff. America's Test Kitchen has a great method for upping the corn content of your cornbread by pulsing together half a cup of fresh corn kernels, 1 1/2 cups of buttermilk, and the sweetener of your choice. I'm going with 2 tablespoons of honey. This is also the opportunity to add a cored and quartered jalapeno pepper. This is not going to bring much heat in and of itself, it's just going to add some color, hence why we added the cayenne cayenne pepper earlier. We're just going to pulse that until it's nicely chopped, maybe 6 to 8 pulses, and then it's time to add the eggs, 2 large eggs, and of course the fat, 1 stick of melted butter that we have allowed to cool completely so it don't scramble the eggs. Pulse this guy 4 to 5 times, just enough to combine, and then it's time to introduce it to our bowl of dry stuff. We're going to dig a well in the center, into which we are going to pour our slurry, just going to make everything a little bit easier to combine. And we are not whisking this, we are mixing it gently with a paddle, because this cornbread contains flour, therefore it contains gluten, therefore if we overmix it, it can become tough. I think the ideal baking vessel for any cornbread is cast iron, which we are going to liberally butter before adding the cornbread. Just going to smooth that out a little bit and garnish with a few sliced jalapenos to indicate that this is indeed jalapeno cornbread. You might notice that this batter is quite thick, and that's okay. Cornbread is extraordinarily forgiving. And after its 20 to 25 minute stint in a 425-degree Fahrenheit oven, we are testing it for doneness with a toothpick, letting it cool for 5 to 10 minutes, and then I'm going to give it a drizzle of honey, brushing it on for even coverage. This is going to create a nice, sticky, shiny glaze, and it's also going to act as an adhesive for some flaky, crunchy sea salt. These toppings make an excellent adornment for any kind of cornbread, and I just cannot recommend them enough. And of course, after allowing to cool for 10 to 15 minutes, we are slicing and serving while still warm. And you'll notice that the thicker batter cornbread has yielded both an uncracked top and a heartier, more robust texture, one that I think suits the jalapeno cheddar variant very well. The cast iron pan has aided in giving it a crunchy dark brown crust. The filling is spicy and cheesy, and the top is sticky and salty. It pretty much rocks out loud, but what if we want to go towards the sweeter side of things? For that, we're going to slightly alter our recipe, this time using 3 tablespoons of sugar instead of 2 tablespoons of honey, same baking powder, baking soda, and salt whisked together, foregoing the pureed corn in favor of 1.5 cups of buttermilk whisked together with 2 large eggs, and utilizing the baker's secret weapon, brown butter. Into a cast iron pan goes 1 stick of butter, which we're going to melt over medium heat while swirling constantly. Why are we swirling constantly, you might ask? Well, how about I show and not tell? I feel like this is going to explode any second. Keep your fingers crossed, guys. Whoa, see? Whoa! Oh my god. Yeah, so go ahead and swirl your butter constantly and forever until the milk fats separate and begin to turn brown. Pour into a heat-proof container, and then it's time to cool this down rapidly by adding 2 ice cubes. Give that a little mix, and within 1 to 2 minutes, or until the ice cubes are fully melted, your butter mixture should be cooled off enough to play nice with eggs. So we're going to combine the two, making sure to include all the nice brown milk solids, add that to the dry ingredients, and gently paddle to combine. And with this recipe, we're going for a more of a pancake batter-like consistency. Our cast iron pan is still lubed up with about a tablespoon's worth of that brown butter, and hopefully it's still nice and hot, so we're going to add our cornbread batter, smooth it out, and dump it directly into our 425-degree Fahrenheit oven for how long, guess it? That's right, 20 to 25 minutes, until deep golden brown around the edges and a toothpick tester emerges relatively unscathed. Brush down with a few tablespoons of honey, sprinkle with flaky, crunchy sea salt, let cool for 10 to 15 minutes, and slice and serve while still warm. And call me a northerner, I guess, because I think this is the apex of the art form. The brown butter brings a distinct nuttiness that really plays well with the corn, and if you introduce honey butter into this situation, I mean, shut the front door. Cornbread is usually an accompaniment, but in this case, it is the main event. It so perfectly straddles the line between sweet and savory, you could serve it with chili or with strawberries and whipped cream. But what if you want to see how distinctly dessert your cornbread can get? Well, for that, we turn to Blue Apron, where they have ingeniously devised a deceivingly simple cornmeal upside-down cake, topped with chopped figs, walnuts, and golden raisins, which we're going to toss quickly in a buttered toffee, spread evenly on a parchment-lined baking sheet, and top with a very thin cornbread batter for a fine cake-like consistency. This recipe is one of the countless examples of how Blue Apron can help you explore new territories in the kitchen. All their meals are perfectly portioned to minimize food waste, and prices start at $7.49 per serving. Every week there are 16 different recipes to choose from, with plans that serve either 2 or 4 people. The fresh ingredients and easy-to-follow recipe cards arrive in a refrigerated box, so they will stay fresh even if you're not home when your package arrives. So build your confidence in the kitchen and learn amazing new recipes like this one, and try Blue Apron today. The first 100 people to sign up using the link in this video's description will receive $60 off their first 3 weeks of Blue Apron. So what are you waiting for? Give it a shot and get cooking.